1. So for context, I live in Colorado, where 1 in 4 adults smoke marijuana. I used to smoke, but so did my dad, whom I live with. I had new neighbors that moved in about 8 months ago, and the literal first day they moved in, they eavesdropped on my conversation with my dad. I only happened to know that because very loudly the man was like, "I know where that smell is coming from. It's the daughter that lives there, smoking." I tuned out the rest because you're not supposed to eavesdrop in Colorado. But I've never met this man, so how did he know I was the daughter? And my conversation involved me and my dad talking about smoking, not just me. The next day, I hear someone running up the stairs in the bedroom next to mine, the new neighbor, and a man saying loudly, "You don't smell that?" My landlord's car was outside, so I figured he was complaining about the smell. Little did he know, because his eavesdropping wasn't the best, that it wasn't just me that smoked, but also my dad and the neighbor on the other side of him. We live in a 4-unit townhouse that also has a manufactured home behind us, less than 10 feet away. And another neighbor smokes cigarettes, which is also supposed to be banned on the premises. Well, the landlord didn't talk to me about it, and the law here is that they are the only ones that complain to the police about our smoking. I stopped smoking, but they found other things to complain about me for. For example, I have auditory hallucinations from a past traumatic experience, and whenever I would talk to myself, they would hit and bang on the wall. I didn't talk too loudly, and they never ever hit the wall when I'm talking with my dad. I even bought a security camera in my home to verify that, so I didn't feel like I was going crazy. The morning I bought it, they were outside the same time I was waiting for it, at 4 a.m., with their car parked up front ready to leave. They rarely leave their house, and their car is parked out front. I happened to be on the phone with my dad, and they commented on that. Weird, right? I don't smoke marijuana anymore, neither does my dad, but I've heard the woman that lives there literally screaming when I burnt sage in my home. At one point, I was listening to music a lot and going outside. I also have social anxiety, and they would comment, "She really likes her music, huh?" The music was in my headphones and was barely audible to people standing next to me. I ended up using sign language to deal with my voices rather than talking to myself, and the literal first time I did it on my back patio. I hear one say, "Oh, now she's signing." There are wooden partitions with small 1/4 of an inch spaces between each 2x4, so I'm not even sure how they saw me, or more importantly, why they are scared. And I can't make this stuff up, I caught it on camera. I tried stopping talking to myself by listening to music to please them, and they complained. I tried to learn signing to stop listening to music, and they commented, while I was being silent. Now, what I don't understand is why they seem to only be complaining about me, even when the other neighbor is still smoking, or why it seems they don't put on fans or things to block out the sounds if they are annoyed. When we have to, especially since when they first moved here, one of them was puking every morning for the first 2 months. I never complained to them about that, and they never came to talk to us about anything, just behind our backs, it seems. The only time I ever hear them talk is when they're complaining really loudly. I think I can help out here, Hellfreezer's note. The answer is quite simple. Your neighbors are crazy. You are the victim du jour, it seems, and they will continue to harass you as quietly as they can get away with it for as long as they're allowed to do so. Don't censor yourself or change your activity to please these idiots, just live your life as you please. 2. So about 3 years ago, I had new neighbors. A family of 4 moved in next door to me. The father in his 40s, the mother also in her 40s, the daughter 16 now, and the son 13 now. The house is a semi-detached and sadly attached to my house. They inherited the house in 2021 and moved into the house in late 2021 off of their elderly disabled relative who sadly passed away in early 2021. I live with my elderly disabled parents and have lived in this house all my life. I got on very well with their elderly disabled relative because I used to do a lot for this person, like I do a lot for my parents. I never took any money except for their shopping, and I always provided proof of purchase. I would do their shopping at the same time I did my parents', and if they needed their repeat medication, I picked that up at the same time too, because they arranged it so I could pick it up at the same time as my parents' medication. So honestly, it was no extra work. They were a lovely person and very easy to live with. Since these new neighbors moved in, my life and the life of my parents has been made into a living hell. It started in late 2021. The boy who was 10 at the time played his video games very loudly throughout the entire night. I would wake often to the sound of crashing cars, shooting, explosions, screaming, and shouting. The noise was terrible. I put up with it for 3 months, and I decided to approach the woman next door. I will state here I am female myself, so it felt appropriate. I asked her if she could stop the boy playing his video game so loudly in the night. She told me in no uncertain terms, "F off, you nosy, see you next Tuesday, and mind your own effing business." So as a result of this, I put in my first complaint to the council. They obviously received a letter from the council because the next week the husband was banging the heck out of my door. I answered the door. Should state here, I had a doorbell camera at this time, so it caught the exchange. He immediately stepped into my house and tried to push his way past me. When that didn't work, he literally had his finger inches away from my face and was threatening me. I immediately told him to get off my property, to which he refused. He stayed on my property, threatening me for another 10 minutes, before the police came and escorted him off the property. Now, I provided the police with the CCTV, and they also witnessed some of the incident, and yet nothing was done about it. It only got worse from here. So the next incident was about 2 weeks later. The woman reversed into my parked car, damaged my car, and just walked off. And yes, this was again caught on my doorbell camera. I contacted the police and reported the incident, and yet again I provided the police with the CCTV, and yet nothing was done about it. So I contacted my insurance and gave them my neighbor's details and a copy of the CCTV. My neighbor was contacted and again came over to my house. It was the woman this time, and she banged the heck out of my door. I answered the door and immediately stepped out of my house and closed and locked my door behind me and told her to get off my property. My parents were at this time contacting the police. She, like her husband, refused to get off my property. I insisted a few more times that she leave, but she didn't. Again, police came and escorted her off. I again provided the police with the CCTV, and again they also witnessed some of the incident, and yet again nothing was done about this incident either. Now, the next incident was about 1 month later. The boy, 10 or 11 at the time, threw chocolate over the dividing wall for my dog, and called my dog to eat it. Now, my dog was in the garden at the time. I was out in the garden with her, but the phone rang and my parents were unable to answer it because one was in the bathroom and the other was ill in bed upstairs. So I quickly ran to get the phone. The phone call was seconds long, and it was someone phoning us to sell us something. I quickly said, "I'm sorry, we're not interested," put the phone down, and ran out to my dog to catch the boy next door running as fast as he could away from the wall, screaming,
"I had your effing dog die, she say you auntie."
A bag of chocolate buttons dumped in my side of the wall, and my dog eating the chocolate buttons, and yeah, this went as well as you could expect. My dog was very sick, but she did survive. It cost me £800 in vet bills, but she is worth it to me. I reported the incident to the police and told them exactly what happened. The vet backed me up, saying in their written report that my dog had indeed ingested the chocolate. The police claimed I could not 100% prove it was done maliciously. The boy, however, did admit to feeding my dog the chocolate. Now at this point I was losing faith in the police. I think anyone would. I got CCTV cameras installed all around my house the next week, the next available appointment with the company. Now, the police set guidelines for me in regards to having CCTV. The police said I cannot record the boy physically while he is in his own house, but I can record audio coming from the boy while he is in his house. The police said I can record the boy physically when he is on public property if he is doing something to me or anyone else. The next incident has basically been repeating itself every single week, twice a week since early 2022. I, or a family member, go out to my back garden, and we basically take my dog out to go to the toilet. The boy's bedroom window overlooks my back garden. I can see their back garden from my bedroom window as well. It's just how the houses were built. So the boy can see me or my family members from his bedroom window. Now, as I said, the abuse used to be aimed at all of us, but now it's mostly me because, as I said, I have 2 elderly disabled parents who are not always able to go outside. So I am the person who takes my dog out the majority of the time. So the abuse is aimed at me the majority of the time. Now, In the last year, I believe the boy has clocked on that on a Thursday night and a Sunday night, I take my parents down to the local bingo from about 6:30 to about 10. Now, they're not always able to go because of their health, but they go 70% of the time, which is perfectly fine. Now, the boy must know the days and times I am in the house alone, because when I take my dog out on these nights, between the time of 6:30 and 10, the boy is in his window screaming and shouting abuse at me. He will sometimes bang his window to get my attention. He then points directly down at me. Now, he will either make a gesture, like running his fingers across his throat, or he will start shouting and screaming abuse. I have at this point got cameras all around my house, and have obviously caught him shouting and screaming at me a larger number of times. Now, I have made a large number of reports to the police about these incidents, and given the police my CCTV evidence, which is in line with the guidelines the police set for me. I will also at this point say some of the time my parents have witnessed the abuse and threats the boy screams and shouts at me. I will also say other people have at times witnessed the abuse and threats the boy screams and shouts at me. I will further say that other people have also had abuse and threats screamed and shouted at them by the boy and his parents. I have provided the police with all the details of any witnesses and other victims. The police have also at times witnessed the issues I am having with the family next door. Now, throughout the years, I have had a number of excuses for the boy's behavior. One, he is a child, he is adjusting to the loss of his elderly relative, which is BS. The elderly relative was estranged. The elderly relative did not bother with these family members, but the elderly relative had no other living relatives. That's how this family got the house. 2, the parents suspect that the boy has mental health issues and are in the process of getting him a diagnosis. This is also BS. The dates and times they claim to be at a doctor's appointment are lies. I know the doctor they are claiming to see personally, a family member. They are not registered in that surgery and have never been, and this doctor is the only doctor in this area and surrounding area with that name. 3, he is being bullied and is now acting out. Also BS. I know the boy's teacher, another family member. The boy is not being bullied, he is the bully. I had to make a number of reports recently at the start of this week regarding the boy next door, for the same reason, screaming and shouting abuse and threats at me from his bedroom window. I contacted the police, and someone came out and witnessed it. I again gave the police the relevant evidence, and my parents who witnessed the most recent incident also confirmed they witnessed it. So, the police come up to my house today, and basically try to accuse me of making fake reports against my neighbors. They try to claim the noise I was complaining to the police about was the family's day-to-day living, and that I'm basically making fake reports to harass my neighbors. The police also tried to say the boy was not screaming and shouting abuse and threats at me, that he was shouting his video games, even though he specifically mentions me and my dog, and it shows in the CCTV, and only screams or shouts when me or a family member, again mainly me, take my dog out for the dog to go to the toilet in the back garden. And again, the CCTV also shows this behavior pattern, because I've always provided the police with 20 minutes before the incident, and 20 minutes after the incident. So basically, I provided them with 40 to 50 minutes of footage for each incident. There is no way anyone can say the abuse, hate, and threats are not aimed at me and my family. I mean, I could not believe how useless the police actually are. I'm literally shocked by how useless the police actually are. They have hundreds of hours of CCTV footage of this boy screaming and shouting abuse and threats at me. Racial slurs, homophobic abuse, discrimination against disability. I'm pretty sure that's aimed more at my parents than me, though. The police have had witnesses back me up, and know there are more witnesses who have seen and heard the boy. The police have had other people, the witnesses, also make complaints because they themselves have been threatened by them. The police themselves have witnessed the boy's behavior, and also witnessed his parents being abusive and threatening towards me and refusing to leave my property. But all of that has been totally disregarded by the police, and I am now being accused by the police of making fake reports against my neighbors to harass them, even though there is literally hundreds of hours of evidence, a number of witnesses who have also been victims themselves, and police officers who have also witnessed the issues. Yeah, fake reports. So as a result of this insane accusation made against me by the police, I have made a formal complaint to the IOPC, and have told them everything, named all of my witnesses and fellow victims, and also sent them copies of all the relevant footage, all the details of each and every witness, and named the officers who have also witnessed the issues. I seriously hope that something eventually gets done, but I have zero faith in the police. The funniest thing is, it's not the first time the police have accused me of being the instigator. They, in 2023, accused me of making threats against my neighbors, because my neighbor made a report about me and submitted footage, apparently. It was of a terrible quality and showed someone in my property facing his camera at like 5 a.m, screaming abuse at the camera. The accusation made against me by the same police force was investigated again after I made another complaint to the IOPC, technically my first complaint, and it was found that I was not the person making threats. It was the girl next door who apparently resembles me. She was in my garden screaming at them after an incident with her brother. She apparently came to my house to seek help. It turns out I and my family were away at the time and the date of this incident. I personally have zero idea why the family next door reported their own daughter, but I don't pretend to know what goes on in their heads. I had a full apology from the police force, mind, but honestly, they are useless. 3. 6 months ago, I moved in with my partner into a new apartment that we needed to furnish. The furnishing was done progressively over the first few days, and since the furniture and appliances were delivered and installed by the stores where we bought them, everything was done during the late morning, at a reasonable hour. However, we still had to assemble some shelves and the sofa, so we did it on the only day we could, Sunday, since the rest of the week we were busy with work. In total, we hung 3 or 4 shelves on the wall, mounted the wall bracket for the television, and finally assembled the sofa. Nothing out of the ordinary. Plus, we did it between noon and 9 p.m., taking breaks to eat and rest. The first conflict came that day at 9 p.m. The downstairs neighbor came up, a young man visibly agitated, speaking politely but at the same time with a tense, passive-aggressive tone, telling us that we'd been making noise all day. He said he understood that we were in the middle of moving, but that Sunday was his day of rest, apparently as God, and he was nervous because he needed to go to bed soon, and he didn't know if we'd keep making all that racket right at 9 p.m. We had already finished. We thought it would be a one-time thing, that he might have just had a bad day, but it didn't end there. This past weekend, my parents came to visit me after several months without seeing each other. I live in a different region in Spain. They arrived at my place at around 12:30 a.m. on Thursday, and they were starving, so we decided to give them something to eat, and they sat down in the kitchen. Nothing happened then. The problem came on Friday. That day we were having dinner at 8 p.m., and the neighbor's partner, also young, came up to our door at 8:51 p.m., complaining that she could hear the sound of the table and chairs moving, and that she was telling us so we could keep it in mind for later hours. We were surprised because the only noise we'd made was moving a couple of chairs to sit down and eat. I thought maybe that same noise at 12:30 a.m. on a Thursday might have disturbed them, and although it was a little bit late for a meal, it was just a one-off due to my parents' late arrival. The next day, Saturday, we were having dinner at 10:10 p.m. In Spain, having dinner between 8 and 10 p.m. is completely normal. And when my father adjusted his chair a bit, making a small noise, the neighbors below began banging on their ceiling with a stick, hitting it violently for nearly half a minute, making our floor shake as a complaint to make us stop making noise. The issue is that our living room and kitchen area is directly above the downstairs neighbor's bedroom. We find the situation surreal, as my partner and I hardly ever spend time in the living room and kitchen except to have meals at regular hours and occasionally watch a movie during the week. We always keep the volume moderate and respect noise levels. While it's true that we may have made some noise on a Thursday, it was a one-time situation that hadn't happened during our first 6 months there. We feel their level of vigilance, their passive-aggressive complaints, and their lack of tolerance for inevitable everyday noises, like adjusting a chair to sit down for dinner, and especially at perfectly reasonable hours, is excessive. Their level of demand is making us uncomfortable in our own home, creating unnecessary stress and even paranoia, making me feel like I need to constantly monitor and excessively control everyday sounds that are normal and unavoidable. Am I doing something wrong? What can I do about my neighbor? Now, Hellfreezer's note. I noticed someone in the comments said, get some rugs, get slippers, and don't stomp around. Make literally no changes whatsoever to your lifestyle. It doesn't sound like you're doing anything that's a problem. Don't put any sliders or anything on the chairs or anything like that. These people are pricks. They're pricks of the highest caliber, and quite frankly, nothing you do to mitigate the noise is going to appease them. They will continue to complain no matter what. I guarantee you, whoever was in your apartment before you moved in were getting harassed by these people too. What you want to do is start recording when they start making noise and what they see as retaliation. Document all that, then contact your landlord and get the situation dealt with. If it's a repeated, continual harassment, they might actually get kicked out. 4. My trashy neighbours moved in 2 years ago. A 50-ish-year-old woman, her 30-something-year-old daughter, and her 2 boys 8 and 5. There are constantly cars coming and going at all hours, with the boys yelling at her to get in or out of the cars, at literally any and every hour. Could be 3 p.m. or 3 a.m. The parental figures don't care. I have no clue who drives what, as they were always changing or adding cars and visitors and parking on my grass, even though they have a driveway. I know what you're thinking about it being a drug house, but I don't think that's the case. They just seem to have a lot of family. Within days, one of the boys broke multiple tree limbs while climbing and hanging on the ornamental dogwood in my yard, after I asked him not to climb it when I heard one snap. No one apologized, reprimanded the son, or said anything to me about it. I then started noticing trash blowing across my yard regularly. They litter everywhere. Let wrappers, trash fall out of their cars, and sometimes throw things near the trash can but not in. The trash kept blowing into my yard, so I put up a mesh fence between our properties. It's only waist high, and has plastic stakes every 8 or 10 feet. Very soon after I had put it up, the boys had broken 2 of the stakes. Seeing a pattern emerging, I left the stakes on their porch with a note saying to please reimburse and stay off my property. I woke up the next day with the items thrown in my front yard. I called the police to help, as petty as it was. They agreed to try to mediate between us, but when the officer and I went over to talk to Big Mama, she flipped out, pulled the race card, and called me a cracker bitch, and said that we weren't going to pay anything, all directly in front of the police. The officer basically shrugged his shoulders and said it was for us to work out in court then. Of course, I didn't sue them over a couple of plastic stakes then, but just this week, someone has driven over or snapped all but 2 of them. So, about 8 in total are laying broken in my front yard right now. Of course, no one has come over to apologize or do anything about it. I don't want to go over there and ask them to pay for the damages because of the reaction last time. But at the same time, I am so irritated and cannot stand the level of disrespect. I guess it's not surprising they're this awful. The only things out of their mouths I've ever heard are cursing at the boys to get their butts inside of the car. I've never heard a single supportive or encouraging thing out of either women or any of the adults that come over. They all just yell at each other. The boys have now been taught to flip me off when they see me. It's so sad. They run laughing to the edge of the road to do it while I'm pulling in or out of my driveway. What would you do? They're renters and I own my home. I should bring it all up to their landlord if I can trace them down. The court fees alone are probably more than the cost of the fence, so I don't want to go that route. Almost forgot this part. I found chunks of broken bricks thrown in my yard multiple times while cutting the grass this summer. The bricks match loose ones from their patio out back. I think they threw them into my yard and under my bushes to mess up my lawnmower. They're that classy. Update. I called the landlord and management company this morning twice, leaving a message the second time. No one answered, obviously, or has called back. They have a small Facebook page that hasn't been active since 2018, so probably for nothing. I'm going to attempt to contact them there, maybe leave a link to the thread on Reddit. I definitely want to thank everyone for their support, advice, and commiserating with me on this. It's been helpful in many ways. I'll be updating as news becomes available. Hellfreezer's note, make sure anytime they're on your property, recording is happening. So get cameras, make sure they're only on your property, because you could get in trouble if they're filming your neighbor's property. But film everything that happens on your property. That will help if it does come to court. Or if you need evidence for the management company. 5. I'm a 28-year-old woman, and my boyfriend, 26, live in a home that was built about 110 years ago. You can imagine how thin these old walls are, so the fact that the house was split up into 2 side-by-side units, we knew it would come with some noise issues. That's just part of shared living, we figured. The first few months were fun. The 2 guys next door would karaoke until midnight, and we made a game of singing along to Mr. Brightside. Seriously, that song played every day, multiple times. We had to respect the dedication. And we appreciated that we all kept to ourselves and nights were calm. Then Karaoke Man moved out. There has been no Brightside since. Then came Bridge Troll. Bridge Troll sublet a room in the other unit that was nestled under my kitchen. He will get his own entire long format one day soon, but to summarize it, Bridge Troll used to call the cops on my boyfriend and I for domestic disputes and loud parties, as well as tell the landlord I had dozens of people over. Every one of these incidents were times when my boyfriend and I were quietly watching a movie, and the huge parties were my Friday afternoon Dungeons & Dragons game, which were over by 10 p.m., and hosts 7 players total. Boyfriend and I, simply put, are quiet, boring nerds. All we do is play video games with headphones on, do puzzles, read, and sometimes host D&D or book club nights. Real wild stuff, I know. Bridge Troll finally moved on to a new bridge last month, but in his wake are seemingly dozens of other young men. I am often in my library, which overlooks their entryway, and I have seen a minimum of 12 men running in and out of the place, usually with suitcases going back and forth from minivans and moving trucks. We have started getting daily mystery food deliveries to our door multiple times a day, which the various men come and collect. I saw in one of the windows, trying not to be creepy, is just right in front of my mailbox, and they left curtains open. Hard to not see, and the bedroom is entirely full of suitcases and piles of clothes and boxes. I don't give 2 hoots what they do in there. I was just intrigued by the sudden changes, and happy Bridge Troll was gone. All was swimming for the first month of this, a nice change. We didn't mind the noise they're amping up every weekend. They didn't mind my Halloween weekend party. We had visions of harmony befalling our humble home. This week has me entirely losing hope that the other unit will ever let us know peace. Boyfriend and I both get up for work at 6 a.m., so we hope noise levels go down around midnight. We don't expect silence, but hey, some relative chill in the wee hours on a weeknight is preferable. Every single night this week we have heard the sound of several men literally yelling up and down their suite stairs to one another, going on until 3 a.m.-ish. On Wednesday, I was super sleep-deprived and went to politely ask if they could keep it down a little. A young man, maybe 21-ish, opened up and said he was sorry, and it magically went to just the sound of normal talking. I was so happy. Yesterday it happens again, and I go over there at 2 a.m. all decked out in my PJs, glasses, frizzy hair, and retainer, and I again knock with the intention of just explaining that I work early and just want a regular level of volume past midnight on weekdays. 2 different young men open the door and immediately tell me they're being dead silent. I'm crazy, to shut up and go and be an old ugly Karen elsewhere. Harsh, but okay, maybe I looked a little insane at 2 a.m. in my socks and sandals outfit, but I'm only 28, dude. Ouch. I'm at my wit's end, but I have given up hope now. I'm going to invest in some quality earplugs, so please plug your favorite brand below. Was I truly being a Karen? Am I old? These things will just have to haunt me. If you're reading this, Karaoke Man, we miss you, and we hope you're doing just fine. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Naughty Neighbours 18. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their story in this video. Before you go, please hit the like button and subscribe, and support me on my Patreon page, which is linked in the description. Every dollar you do there helps very much. Okay. No other. Oh, we also have memberships if that interests you. You might want to check out, see what we're doing there. I've set that up a little differently than Patreon, so have a look at both and see whichever one tickles your fancy. Okay, let's see. No other business today, so let's move along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is: when did you last have something break randomly? Not your fault, it broke. For me, it was very recently. It was just a few days ago. I was cycling. That's kind of my mode of transport. I keep telling myself I'll get a driving license one day, and I did take lessons for quite a while. But well, you've all heard me mention my creepy instructor. Dear, creepy man. Anyway, right now I just use a bicycle because for my immediate needs, I don't have far to go, so it gets me there and back, and I use that for doing my grocery shopping. So I was cycling home the other night, and then suddenly I hear unfortunate sounds. A concerning and troubling sound from the rear. Now, it wasn't unexpected flatulence, as you might be thinking. No, it was in fact something to do with the tire. So I had to bring the bike to a very sudden halt. Thankfully, I avoided hurting myself, which is good. It's always good to avoid hurting yourself whenever possible. And I looked at it was dark by this point, and I looked at the tire, and it looks like the nut of the quick release had somehow come loose, which is impressive because it had been the last time I had that tire off was earlier this year when I had to replace the inner tube, and it had been very firmly, happily on there doing its job ever since. And those things don't usually just come off randomly, but I guess they can, so it must have loosened somehow. And then that came off. Then the skewer that goes through the middle, which attaches everything on, also come off. So that was gone. I would have had to replace that anyway. And by the time I get the bike home, somehow the entire axle that goes through the wheel is now missing. And I wasn't even 100%. I mean, that must have come off fairly close to home because I was able to adjust the wheel so that it would actually turn and get the bike home. But it was at night. It was Halloween, so there was kids and their parents running around doing the Halloween thing, and I just wanted to get away from the noise and the chaos of it all. Plus, no guarantee as to where it fell off. I mean, it must, like I say, have been relatively close. But what that meant was I had to replace the whole axle, the quick release, and at least one of the bearing cages, which is fun. Thankfully, all that together is not very expensive. So I've ordered the parts. I'm waiting on them arriving so I can ride my bike again. The only part I'm sort of concerned about is whether or not I ordered the right kind of bearings. But we'll see. We'll see. Let me know what you think in a comment below. And before we go, let's take a look at the answer of the day from a previous video. And this one comes from Naughty Neighbours 17 and was about disagreements with neighbours. I mentioned one of my neighbours being presumptuous about trimming something in my yard because it was dangling very, very slightly over into his yard instead of just asking me to do it, which would have been the neighbourly thing to do. And let's see. Today's answer comes from Jana Comas. This was a long time ago, but when my family bought our house, a small farm, we bought land and everything on it. That included the barn and hay inside. Neighbor came over trying to claim the hay. He didn't have any animals needing it, just wanted to sell it. My grandmother told him no, and it belonged to her. When he came by that night to take it away, she greeted him with a shotgun in her arms. Never bothered us again, but we were outcast as well. Thank you very much for your answer. I mean, people who lay claim to your property, maybe they had an arrangement with the previous owner, but, arrangements you had with the previous owner are null and void when the previous owner goes away. It's just very presumptuous, so I don't think anything significant was lost there. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.